Thank you for joining Behind Enemy Lines. I'm Michael Lauber. Tonight, Terry couldn't be with us, but I'm joined by the other Mike. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Good to see you again. Great to be back.
Well, great to have you again. And tonight we've got a very special guest with us, a prolific author of over 50 books, Harvard graduate, and I'm sure he's been a lifelong terrorist to the left. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people having nightmares about Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us here tonight.
My great pleasure. I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
Well,
welcome. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, I want to say thank you again for joining us. And if our audience doesn't already know who you are, then they're probably watching the wrong program, or they're just starting out. Because we were talking off air. I was trying to figure out when I picked up one of your old favorites, Obama Nation. This was the first book of yours that I had read, but you are a prolific author. I've got 10 of your titles up on the screen, but I did not realize that you'd written and co-authored an estimated 50 books, and you've dove into a number of topics relevant to tonight and relevant to the current state that our nation is in, from the threat from Iran, which is kind of what brings you to us tonight, but to Obama, the fake birth certificate, his infiltration into the White House, his ties to the Communist Party. And you've done a lot to expose the left's game, the red-green axis, the threat from Islam. You're an expert on very many subjects, most of which our audience needs a better education on. So does most of the country.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've widely published, and I did my first. I published 3 books when I was undergraduate under my own name, and so I mean, I started publishing early, about 17 years old. I was working on books.
Oh, wow.
It took a while for me to have my own name on them, but I was editing and working in books in public relations, worked my way through college in public relations as a writer. So I've always been able to be a writer, and it's really one of the only things I really wanted to do, publish books.
Well, nothing wrong with that, because again, you've done a lot to educate a lot of people, and it's, again, what I like about your writing style is it's very approachable. You do a good job explaining things, building up, and to more complex topics as it proceeds. And that's something some people that are experts have trouble doing. But tonight, the main thing that kind of brings us together is Iran. So I kind of start off by getting the broad overview, like how do you think the end result is? And to be honest, I'm not so sure the ceasefire is going to hold. But we'll wind it back to the negotiations between Trump and then Israel coming in when Iran essentially refused to show up at the table and make any kind of negotiation. Because personally, I don't think you can negotiate with the Islamic regime in Iran anyway, that they're not going to stick to whatever they say. They're going to essentially they're buying time. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation from beginning to where we stand today?
Well, first of all, I think Donald Trump wanted to make it clear that he wanted peace rather than war. And so he did not want to go to war as the first impulse. He wanted to give enough time that if the negotiations failed, it was not because he wasn't trying. It was because the Iranians weren't interested in negotiations. And he made that abundantly clear. But it was very important for him to establish himself as a peacemaker. And that's what he's wanted to do, and he has that in his heart. And I think he's right to do that. I mean, even going biblically with the Jesus Christ Beatitudes, and he said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they are the sons of God. And it's very rare that anyone on earth is a peacemaker.
Agreed.
And Trump has understood that and conceptualized that and internalized it so that he's going to go on the record that he wants peace, not war. That's consistent. Now, the fact is that the Iranians have no interest in peace. They are radical, insane maniacs who are determined. They have this bizarre Shiite religion, which I'm sure we'll discuss.
Yes.
But they look forward to apocalypse, and they think that they'll triumph in apocalypse, and they are insane about destroying Israel. So therefore, this mad obsession that I was writing about in my first book, Atomic Iran, 2005, on Iran, I made it clear that the Iranian regime was determined to develop a nuclear bomb and detonate it on Israel. This mad obsession was that one nuclear weapon, not of even very great yield, the size of the bombs we dropped in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, that type of a bomb was detonated over Tel Aviv, it would destroy the modern Jewish state as we know it. So
Yes.
Israel is a one-bomb state. It takes one bomb to destroy Israel. Israel never would have a hard time recovering from that because it would be economically destroyed.
Oh, absolutely.
Jerusalem and Haifa. There's not many other major cities I've been to Israel many, many times. I've consulted with the government many times. But the point is that Israel's very vulnerable, and the mullahs know that. So they have this religious obsession with this idea that they can kill all the Jews and get them out of the Middle East and destroy the state of Israel. And that obsession drives their policies on all fronts, and they can't be shaken from it. So, the idea of abandoning in nuclear enrichment, and Trump kind of cornered them. He didn't want to say, well, you can slow it down, or we'll let you have a period of time and phase it. And that's all John Kerry.
Yeah.
John Kerry, I also opposed. And the first book I had written that achieved national fame was Unfit for Command, which I co-authored in 2004 with John O'Neill, the Swiftboat book.
Yes.
Unfit for Command, Swiftboat veterans speak out against John Kerry, which did a lot to derail John Kerry's campaign. But I constantly pointed out that John Kerry was saying, even in 2004, that we ought to give Iran a nuclear weapon to see what they would do with it, like Clinton had done with North Korea. Well, we know what they would do with it. They'd make a bomb out of it. And so that was, again, John Kerry's anti-Americanism. Kerry, under Obama, architected the policy of this agreement with Iran that allowed Iran to continue enriching uranium, slowed him down until after Obama was out of office, and then Obama shipped them airplanes full of cash.
Yeah, pallets of cash. Yeah, I mean,
Corsi, Mike, if I could,
yeah, go for it.
You're very well versed in Atomic Iran, so much that I think that's the title of one of your books, correct?
Yes, Atomic Iran.
So you've done a lot of research on that, and I know there's a lot that goes into writing a book as far as research and getting your facts right. We just took out 3 sites in Iran, and Trump says the damage sets Iran back years, but intelligence agencies and that, they're already leaking that it's just a couple of months. What's the truth? What do you think?
Well, if you look at the woman who wrote those reports, and I don't remember her exact name, but she works for CNN, and she was one who championed the Steele dossier. She was talking about how she was one of the initial promoters of the Steele dossier. She was a promoter of in fact, I think she wrote the key story on the 51 intelligence agents, intelligence chiefs who said that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. So all she was doing was taking CIA propaganda, a lie, a narrative, and trying to implant it in the public narrative so as to discredit or raise questions about President Trump. And that was planting misinformation. They had a preliminary report that came out somewhere out of the intelligence agencies. It was with very low confidence, which means they couldn't validate anything in the report. And it was written, obviously, and initiated by somebody who hated Trump and wanted to discredit the fact that this strike, which was the most massive display of military power yet in the history of the world. We've never had an operation of this magnitude, which involved a large number of B-2 bombers, some sent in diversion to Guam, in a highly well-timed, high-precision, complicated attack where they were joined along the way by fighters and other airplanes. They had to be refueled multiple times going across the ocean, which is not easy. It's a complex process, very dangerous. To synchronize 2 airplanes and have one refuel the other. And the entire flight time, getting there and coming back, was something like 36 hours. Well, that's more than one full day, 24 hours plus 12 more hours. So it's a day and a half in the air to get there and come back. And these are on planes that are capable of very high speeds and stealth maneuvers. So if you think about, if you've ever flown to Europe, just to get to New York to London or Rome is 6 to 8 hours, and to get anywhere to Israel is 8 or 10 hours by, and Iran is a great distance from Israel, 1,000 more miles. So I mean, you're flying almost like 2/3 of around the globe to do the bombing raid.
Yeah.
Complex formations and different timing coming in formation, so the fighters are ahead, and you've got different planes with different tactical missions to set the stage for the bombers. And then these bombers were trying to drop these bunker busters down the ventilation holes of the underground facility, so they would explode 200 or 300 feet below ground. And every single one, and the bombs were dropped with precision. The entire mission went off with enormous power, and we didn't lose a single military officer or military. None of our troops were lost. Everybody returned home safely.
And I'll tell you, despite of that, it seems like the intelligence community is always trying to downplay Trump's wins. I mean, why do you think that is?
Well, because they hate Trump.
Yeah.
Under Biden, our military would never have performed. Wouldn't even have imagined it. Biden's administration, with admirals in dresses and wearing lipstick, they could maybe run a transgender parade down the Champs-Élysées, but they could not. But they're not going to get anything under the Biden administration. Look at the Democrats. Jimmy Carter tried to have a raid, and when we had the 444 American hostages, in his presidency after the 1979 takeover of Ayatollah Khomeini, coming back from France. Well, Jimmy Carter had helicopters that couldn't make it through the desert. Helicopters collapsed in the desert, and the mission was a failure. Pictures were taken of it. That's a Jimmy Carter mission. The Democrats could not run a military because they don't believe in the military.
Well, exactly. Yeah, they'd still be looking for the right transgender pilot to put in the stealth plane before it left.
It would be a DEI mission.
Stealth transgenders, that's scary.
You don't want DEI in charge of a B-2 bomber. I'm sorry.
No.
That's not what, And to do this mission required not only advanced training and advanced military discipline, but great skill and precision operations, which had to be, timed down to the second.
Yes.
And if it wasn't coordinated, you could have a military disaster at any moment. So they had to come in stealth. They had to drop their munitions and not have any retaliation at all from Iran, not a single missile or an anti-aircraft of any kind fired at them. And they complete their mission. And I'm sure the damage done from all the reports that I've seen, the independent reports, it was one strategic analysis from one of the think tanks, the damage was massive.
Oh, yeah.
So they're said there's no way you're going to repair the facilities. Those facilities would take years just to get the rubble gone, let alone reconstitute the facility and reinstitute the centrifuges. I mean, Iran is pretty much out of the nuclear game for the foreseeable future, and I'm not sure they'll ever get to re-enter it. I mean,
no.
We'll be long gone before Iran gets back into the. Certainly, I will be long gone because it's going to take them years. It's going to take them a decade or more.
Dr. Corsi, you used the word massive with the damage there. Do you think that shifts how the world sees American power now?
Yes, American power is now suddenly recognized for what it is, a massive power. And our technical capabilities, we don't really have any comprehension of. The weaponry the United States has not been used and demonstrated. Now, when you see the ability of Donald Trump to pull off a mission like this with Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and the Joint Chiefs, this General Kane,
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with top military officers who know what they're doing, and this now sets a tone in the military where our recruitment numbers are way up. The military are now going to get training. They're going to get respected. They're going to have a ability to defend this country with firepower that is unimaginable. Russia stood down. China stood down. Did nothing. And Iran. So the Ayatollah comes out of his bunker and says, "We won the war." It's like, Hitler walking around in the rubble of Berlin in 1945 saying, "We got it just where we want it." I mean, it's insanity. They didn't win any.
Well, I think you make a really good point that this did show the world, not just Iran, what we really are capable of. And this is on the heels of the India-Pakistan conflict that just went on. Everybody was looking to that to see how Chinese made vehicles, how their aircraft would do, and wasn't that impressive. So I think this does show we're still number one militarily. Russia is not nearly the threat we thought they were. They would have taken down Ukraine years ago. China's probably another paper tiger, but they have so many people they can just keep throwing things near endlessly. But this shows again like what it means to put America back on top, to really have a good military. But what I want to focus on is going forward. I don't think Iran's going to be back in the nuclear game anytime soon. Like you said, they're whatever they had left is pulverized, it's obliterated. They've essentially vaporized whatever centrifuges they had. If there was uranium down there, they're going to be picking it out of the cement bunker walls for the next decade. But what do you think the next steps for them will be? Because this is my one concern there is I kind of would have liked to have seen Israel finish the job, and instead of having if we're going to go this far, they're going to run all these attacks, take out all these IRGC and Iranic regime, their assets. That they're at the point where the regime is finally at its weakest. The people there really do want freedom. I think a lot of people in the U.S. don't understand that the Persian population was not Islamic prior to that regime taking over. That they used to be a free country. They used to call them Mini America. They actually used to use the U.S. Constitution, made a part of their law within the country. But well, minus the Second Amendment, of course. But what is going to happen going forward? Because that's my real concern now, is that there'll be some sort of retaliation both on us, on Israel, across Europe, and they're still there to finance terrorism around the world. Like, what can be done to prevent that?
Well, I mean, if you take a look at the United States over the past, going back to, I guess, even going back to probably George W. Bush, 9/11. If you look at our experience in the Middle East, our military strikes have been remarkably effective. We've done the military comes in and gets the job done right away. In terms of even Iraq, if you take a look at the first Iraqi war, it lasted only a few days. We were able to win militarily, even going after Osama bin Laden. We didn't catch him right away, but we certainly. Afghanistan destabilized the Taliban. Our military comes in a very short period of time. The military's got the situation handled. Then if we stay and we occupy, that's where we make a mistake.
Yes.
Because eventually the country destabilizes again. We being there so long add to the destabilization. Fundamentally, the Middle East is not a stable place because of many things, including that the economy is so bad and these Muslim countries are incapable of producing economic development. The culture, it does not induce work ethics. Culture is basically not work hardly at all. Fundamentally, a Muslim country is not a modern industrial state. So it's likely to be prone to war, political dissent, and civil internal strife. Mm-hmm. So therefore, we should not stay long term. Secondly, regime change. If we impose regime change, we're imposing our will on the people, and it won't work. Now, if the people of Iran decide they're going to overthrow the Ayatollah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
And maybe this time, and the Ayatollah comes out of his bunker and makes bold statements. We're going to resume nuclear enrichment right away. Yeah, well, okay, fine. You can say that. You don't have any capability of doing that. It's a complete nonsense statement.
Yes.
Bravado. You get 10 points for big talk. You get 0
Yeah.
points for delivery. Okay, and then they come out and say, well, we won the war. Okay, so what this indicates is that the Ayatollah is in a weak position. He's very lucky that he didn't get assassinated, because Israel, I remember having discussions with the Israel military after I wrote Atomic Iran, and I knew back then and thought it was a very good policy. They were already infiltrating agents within Iran. They were going to control Iran from within. If there ever was a war, we would have a large number of the Revolutionary Guard who are really Israeli agents, a number of the scientists who are working for Israel, a number of the government who are working for Israel, and they were capable of decapitating scientists. The top scientists were just murdered.
Yeah.
Top Revolutionary Guard were murdered. And I'm sure they knew where the Ayatollah lived. I think they put a missile through his bedroom one day. Okay, but the point is, he didn't get killed. He's lucky he didn't get killed. And in a sense, I think Israel would have, had the war continued any length of time, the next phase would have been to kill the mullahs. Okay,
Yes.
Now, in one sense, that would have been effective, but hard to predict how it would go, because the people, you kill this top level of mullahs, we just promote the younger ones into power positions. They're still powerful. You're not going to do regime change of any effective kind. If the regime is overthrown by a popular revolution that says we're tired of these people, we're to kill them all and get them out of the country, very much like we did the British.
Yeah.
Well, that was a stable takeover of the government, so that Britain, and even Britain came back in 1812 and tried to do it again. That's bad.
Yes.
The point was, the American leadership, having rejected the British, wanted nothing to do with the British, and that was done. Okay, but it was internal. We revolted against the British. Okay, now it wasn't the French coming in and killing the British, and we didn't like either one of them. And a regime change doesn't come from the people themselves. It's not organic. It's not going to necessarily work. If the people rise up, they have to organize to rise up. They have to face great odds of the military opposing them. And if they're successful in winning, they go through enough stages of organization and resolve and ingenuity. When they do take over, they're going to be legitimately the new government. Okay, so that's the only way you can do regime change that has any real probability of working.
Agreed.
The CIA assassinating people all over the country, even Mossadegh in Iran, in the 1950s. They killed Mossadegh because he was the prime minister who wanted to basically make government enterprises of the state oil enterprises. He wanted to nationalize the state oil reserves so that it didn't go to U.S. economic interests like Standard Oil and the others.
Sure.
So we assassinated him. Well, our CIA gets into assassination, and they assassinate John Kennedy, assassinate our own president. So
Yeah.
now you've got an internal intelligence agency that's out of control. Okay, so these intelligence agency operations to induce regime change are a long-term, no-end occupation of a country are bad strategies. And Donald Trump did the right thing. He struck it, got out. He said, I'm done. My job was to make sure they don't have nuclear weapons. They don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
Whatever government they have is up to the people. I don't care. He'll probably sign an agreement with them, even with the mullahs, because he did his job and he's done. And I'm going to say that's probably the right strategy. Because let the Iranian people now sort out the rest.
Yeah, I agree, because I do think external regime change doesn't work. It's going to have to come internally from the people. They're going to have to rise up. That anything less than that won't be viewed as legitimate. What I'm hoping is they will take to the streets now that the bombs aren't falling, the missiles aren't coming in from Israel, and now that the IRGC has been crippled. We have started to see some of them last night in small groups come out in the streets, but it's not really organized to the point even where it was during the Masa Amini protests a few years ago. But yeah, I do think ultimately if we want to address the major threat from Islamic terrorism, that the Iranian government has to be removed. But you're right, it has to be done internally or it's not going to stick. It's just going to create more chaos, and we'll have more potential people just as bad, if not worse, springing up like whack-a-moles.
And I also want to say, look, this is early stages. The
Yes.
mullahs are not sure they won't be killed if they come out of their hiding, and so therefore it's very tentative right now. If the mullahs do come back in, they're going to have a lot of problems. Number one, the country has been badly hurt economically. A lot of the oil infrastructure is also damaged. It'll be hard for them to generate revenue in Iran right away. We can certainly maintain sanctions to try to make sure they don't have money to support terrorism again. So the main question is going to be, how do the people eat? How do the people survive? What's the inflation going to be in the country and in the currency? Is the currency going to be worth anything? Is there anything to buy? I mean, the country's a shambles right now, and the country is completely in disarray and disorganized, kind of like Europe was after World War II.
Sure.
It's not quite as devastated because we did not attack the civilian areas. Civilian areas are still intact, but is there food in the markets? I'm not sure. Is the money worth anything? I'm not sure. Are people back at work? I doubt it. So you don't have a stable situation yet, and the attacks, everything could resume at any minute. Israel's not fully within the control of the United States. It's going to take one attack or one incident and another retaliation, and you're back at war again.
Yes. Yeah, and at the moment, I guess that would be my bigger concern, that we will see either someone from Iran, because there's still launchers driving around the desert out there that I know people are keeping an eye on, but either somebody going rogue or just taking a direct order, firing a missile into Israel, and then Israel responding with overwhelming force, and then we're right back where we were before.
It could. I don't think it's. I mean, I think that what Donald Trump's going to try to do next, as I watch and monitor what he's doing.
The world's about to end here.
Would you be able to mute your phone?
Yeah, I'm going to do that right now, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
Storm going on there. It sounds like.
Yeah. It sounds like he's getting bombed in Chicago.
Yeah, bombed in Chicago. Well, look, Trump is going to roll out immediately again the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
And he's going to say, let's go to peace. Okay, now here's the way you do peace. He's going to say to Israel and Gaza, you've got enough control of the Gaza, and so now stop. You don't stop the fighting, and we're not going to let the Palestinians return. Certainly not the Palestinian Authority. So we're going to offer other states. Libya has already offered to take Palestinians, and he's going to say, Palestinians who want to leave, we're going to provide places for you to go where you're going to have a better life. And probably countries like Libya. And I've delivered messages into the White House. I've published articles. I've been working with people in Libya. I know Libya is a country. Philip Escarabage is a good friend of mine, wants to become a special envoy, and he's close to the government, and he has convinced the government. I've worked with Peter Escarabage back to 2015. He comes from Bedminster. He had married into the Malcolm Forbes family. I worked with him for a long time. He's got a lot of credibility in Iran, and I mean in Libya, and he can convince the Libyan government to take Palestinians and to reunite the country, especially if they get some American aid.
Sure.
Okay, and not only economic aid, but aid in terms of revitalizing and getting their oil production back into the market. What Donald Trump is about, and he's going to start talking about, the peace through prosperity.
Yes.
In other words, if we get this insane idea of getting rid of the Jews in Israel because of some mad Jew hatred and insanity of some psychosis, that these people are somehow evil and have to be destroyed, and all of the stereotyping that Hitler did to make these people demonized,
Yeah.
Just say, okay, they're human beings. The Israelis are probably the most productive and brilliant people in the region and maybe worldwide. If I'd been alive in World War II, I would have wanted to get as many of the Jews out of Germany as I could, just for the gene pool,
Sure.
just for the brilliance of the people.
Yeah.
And so, the fact is, the Israelis are far advanced technologically. Many of our fighter jets are equipped with Israeli technology. We
Yeah.
send a lot of our fighter jets over there to be internally equipped with the technology that Israel's developed. Israel's developed much of our technology, including cell phones and all kinds of other technology that we use worldwide,
Yes.
originated with Israeli technology. Okay, and so therefore, if you had peace and Israel was productive and made economic agreements with these countries, you could make
Hmm.
the Middle East prosper. Hydroponics in the desert, you could produce 3 or 4 cycles of food. You could feed the world out of the desert in the Middle East. All they'd have to
That
do is agree to do it.
Well, yeah, and, that really makes a lot of sense in economic prosperity. A lot of times I talk about how, and this is again something else that's widely discussed. Trade influences peace. Economic prosperity influences peace. So if Israel can develop some of these technologies, maybe outsource them, put a factory over in Lebanon, provide, or in Lebanon, in Libya, wherever else, any place where they can get the country to sign on to the Abraham Accords and agree to acknowledge Israel's right to exist and just start there. But if you can bring these high-paying jobs into those countries, it's going to create prosperity, and it isn't going to just benefit the people there. It's just going to be like anywhere else that the third world develops. You have a factory come in making Nikes, and after a few years, you have people there to supply those workers. You have new small businesses popping up, whether that's transportation back and forth to work, cooking lunches, whatever else. But you have to take those first steps to create an environment where the economy can grow before you have economic prosperity, and then that eventually leads to stability. Sorry, go ahead.
Look at Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
Dubai is really developed and prospered. Okay, so Trump is talking about making, the North Africa and the Gaza, the Riviera, the Middle East.
Yeah.
Okay, now you could do that. Okay, so that's going to cost billions of dollars. Well, Trump doesn't. We don't have to spend billions of dollars of taxpayer money. Let's use the government guarantees, and private capital will come in. Private
Mm-hmm.
capital will develop hotels, will develop resorts. If you've ever been to Israel, the coastline along the Mediterranean is beautiful.
Sure.
It's just throughout North Africa. I mean, you'll find more Roman ruins in North Africa than almost anywhere else in the world, because the
Yes.
Romans knew that North Africa was a great place to develop towns that were resorts and towns that were flourishing. Carthage flourished, and
Mm-hmm.
in the Punic Wars. Carthage, and finally, the Romans came and destroyed Carthage because Carthage constantly went to war with Rome, and Hannibal invaded with elephants. I mean, you had 3 Punic Wars, and Rome just eventually had enough.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you develop North Africa as a tourist location, you developed the Gaza, and with private capital, you not only create jobs, but you would create economic prosperity. You could have
Mm-hmm.
casinos, you could have entertainment, you could have lots of, there would be world sites that people would come to, as provided they were safe. Now, and the other part that's got to be developed here is once Islam's got to go through a reformation. Every
Yeah.
major religion in the world has gone through a reformation. Okay, now you can't dress the women and abuse the women as like it's the 14th century,
Yeah.
and you can't, you know, beat the children and have the male dominance of society and preach a religion that's hateful and that, kill all other religions. We had insanity in Christianity when people left their homes in the Middle Ages and walked off to the Holy Land in order to beat the Muslims and take care of Jerusalem, and abandoned their families and went off with these huge mobs, going to Israel with the Crusades. And
Sure.
so, if we stop the insanity of these religions with, by putting people to work and giving people opportunities, and drop the idea that they have to have jihad and can't assimilate,
Yeah.
And the behaviors in Europe, where there have rape gangs going and killing women, they don't assimilate. They want Sharia law. Well,
Yeah.
Sharia law is the most brutal thing in the world. They sexually mutilate young girls so they can't have orgasms. I mean,
Yeah.
they do horrific things, and these have to be stopped if the religion is going to become a legitimate religion.
Yeah.
The only way you can do that is to bring Islam into the 21st century, and it's going to start with economic prosperity. Now, Trump's view is you have a war, just perpetuates the next war because you're going to go kill people. Now, all their fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters, all their relatives want revenge.
Of course.
So every war just sets in the seeds for the next war. And Donald Trump's come to realize that cycle has to be broken, where you say we're not going to have another war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now the point we're getting to in human civilization is that another war is going to take a thermonuclear war of any kind, and any conflict could become one.
Yes.
So if they really want to get rid of the state of Israel, that's going to be a thermonuclear war, because Israel's got thermonuclear weapons and they're going to use them in survival.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they're not going to ask anybody's permission.
No.
So you're not going to get rid of the state of Israel without a thermonuclear war. So therefore, to go to war with Israel is insanity, because it's not going to end well. It's not going to solve any purpose. It's a stupid thing to do. So forget about it. Let's just accept the Jews and let's work with them. Let's make this region prosper, and let's make sure that people have enough economic security that they don't want to go to war. What the average human being wants to be able to, feed themselves, feed their children, have a place to sleep, have a sanitary condition in which to live, have relative safety so they don't get killed in the middle of the night by thieves, or Venezuelan gangs, or MS-13 guns. And so therefore, they want to die in their beds, surrounded by their loved ones, their grandchildren, and having lived a long life. Most human beings on the face of the earth want basically the same thing. And so therefore, the common values are security, order, and that's where the Democratic Party is supporting MS-13 and the Democratic is supporting every satanic idea that I've seen in the last, I'll be 79 years old this year, and they've supported every satanic idea that I've seen come along the pike.
Yeah.
The idea of mutilating children before they reach the age of puberty, and the idea that you can have satanic symbols and rituals in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Can't have God in the public square. I mean, the Democrats are a party right now of insanity, and they're going to have a Muslim socialist be mayor of New York.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's really the thing right there is it isn't just that they're on the wrong side of one or two issues. They're on the wrong side of every 70-30, 80-20, and 90-10 issue I can think of, from the LGBTQ, MS-13, tranny madness in the schools, attacking parental rights, to standing up for illegal aliens above American citizens and our safety. It really is like they're just totally off the rails, but luckily they are starting to pay the price for it. Their approval right now, depending on what poll you believe, is somewhere between 17 and 21%, including even Trafalgar and some other Marist left-leaning polls. Even they have them clocked at right about 21% right now. Whereas the Republican support for President Trump and his agenda is at a high, if not an all-time high. Is the support for mass deportations, last time I looked, was at an all-time high. Picked up 4 points when we started having the ICE riots. I don't know that the Democrats are going to learn a lesson, and I guess this kind of gets into another area of your expertise. Will their party get back onto some kind of track that resembles something normal? Because I think for like the last 20 years is really how long this hate America has developed. Now, maybe that's just my observation from my perspective, but I mean, I remember as a little kid where I might not have agreed with what the Democrats were saying, or my parents might not have, but it wasn't totally insane like the stuff we are now, or self-destructive.
Well, the Democratic Party first merged to become a communist party. That started in the 50s. They started in Hawaii. They had a plan to become a communist party. I've written about that. Then they through the Lyndon Johnson period of time, moving into more socialism, they knew, the Cloward Piven crowd, that they were forcing us into socialism in order to destroy America. Okay, the goal was to destroy America. Okay, now the Democratic Party then became a socialist party, then a communist party, and now it has become a treasonous party, hating America,
Yeah.
and they're embracing anarchy. And they have a dark side which is comfortable with Satanism. So
Yes.
they do not mind creating vaccines that kill people if the viruses don't kill people. They don't mind putting mRNA in our food or in our air or
No.
anything else that will kill people. And our national security policies in the 1970s, when Henry Kissinger signed National Security Memorandum 200, global depopulation has been the official policy of the United States, killing people. Okay, so, and then we embrace, Satanism, which has this dark side of sexualizing children, sexually mutilating so they don't procreate. Satan hates life. Only God can create life, and Satan hates that. So we have abortion, we kill babies, and we mutilate children so they can't conceive babies. We stop the population of the world from growing. We tell people we'd be happier if we had 500 million people in the country, or 500,000. They don't care.
Yeah.
And they want to become transhuman, and they want to put chips in their heads so they become like machines. And they become, this is the post-human era in which we humans, if read Harari and these other nutcases, human beings are the problem. This world would be a great place except for the people. Get rid of people is be a great place, but they never include themselves as the ones they want to get rid of.
No, of course not.
If you start worshiping Satan, start worshiping the dark side, you start, and then you get into pedophilia, massive pedophilia among the leadership and elite all over the world. I'm about to expose the real difficulties with Act Blue.
Oh, good.
We've got I've got Sean Taylor has been researching this for 15 years. He's a whistleblower. He was a police officer, assistant police chief in a small town
in Louisiana or Tennessee. Okay.
Tennessee.
I had the wrong state, but I do know him, actually. I produced a show he interviewed on maybe 8 or 9 months ago with Sharona Bishop.
Okay, well, I've turned over his materials to the Department of Justice, and they're taking it seriously. Investigation will be opened, and I'm going to start writing about it. Now, what they did was essentially, he started noticing that there were drug trafficking off the waters into Tennessee, by Nashville, and he saw that there was child sex trade being brought in. He tracked it to the groups doing it, and these groups were they were getting massive amounts of money into banks. TD Bank was one of the banks. Other Canadian banks were involved, but they would buy homes for $100,000, and they would get $1 million loan on it. As the drug money went in, the loan was booked and given. You could see it in LexisNexis as a transaction, but then it would eventually disappear. So now what happened was that Act Blue made a deal with the open border, and I'll get to that in a minute. And so the open border, they allowed the communist Chinese with fentanyl. That was a source of profit. They allowed the Sinaloa drug cartel with cocaine and marijuana. And they allowed the sex traffickers with all these unaccompanied minors coming across the border, probably 300,000 minimum, sold into sex slavery. Okay, now that money comes into the country, goes into the banking system, and then the drugs are brought internally into the United States, and the children, more money's made, put in the banks, and money laundering scheme comes out of the bank. By the time it gets up to Act Blue itself, the people who are heading Act Blue are buying $1 million homes and getting $150 million loans out of it. Okay, so what they're doing is they're funding the NGOs.
Yes.
So Antifa and Black Lives Matter and these other NGOs, money traces back to drug trafficking on the border and traces back to child trafficking. Our government, as Jason Jones, I believe, of Border Agents told Congress this past week, our federal government is the biggest child sex trade trafficker in the world. We are the biggest drug agent in the world. We are the drug cartels.
Yeah.
Now, how did this start? All right, well, got another whistleblower, Mark Montgomery, and I've got him on my website, CorsiNation.com. I've been interviewing him, and I've been working with those close to it, and with Archbishop Vigano in Rome. Okay, so Archbishop Vigano points out that when Obama was in office, about 2011, Archbishop Eric, he was in Washington, D.C., he raised a lot of money.
Yes.
And he was homosexual. He's having sex with the seminarians. And he was a pedophile. He was having sex with the altar boys.
Yeah.
So he comes into the White House through, I believe, McDonough, who was the chief of staff under Obama. And they get together with Pope Francis's instruction from the Vatican. It's suggesting that we make an alliance with Honduras. So we make an alliance with Honduras, like a Peace for Progress alliance, with the president and the son of the president and Honduras, who are both in the Sinaloa drug cartel. In fact, the president goes to prison for that. The son takes over and continues it. So Biden makes an agreement, pays billions of dollars to Honduras, and suddenly we get an agreement in the Golden Triangle. So Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras openly push millions of people towards the border. Biden opens the border, and we have an invasion. That invasion starts the drug trade. It starts the child pedophilia. The Biden family is making money on this, and it's going through the banking system, which means that the CIA and the Treasury Department, monitoring bank, they're in on it, getting their cut. So the CIA starts running the drug trade, just like they did with HSBC, which I caught money laundering in 2011 as well. Okay, and this money flows in to Democratic operatives in the country who are operating in the drug trade and this child sex trade. They get the money out of the bank through this mortgage fraud, and that money funds the NGOs. So Black Lives Matter suddenly gets millions of dollars to cause trouble, and the people who run Black Lives Matter have homes that they buy, some which they live in, others which they get mortgages on. So they get tens or hundreds of millions of dollars out, which they can keep personally. So the leaders of Black Lives Matter or Antifa live millionaire lives through the money. And the money from the Democratic Party, NGOs, traces back to fentanyl, cocaine, and child sex trafficking. Now, if that isn't evil, I don't know what is.
Yeah,
and that's how the Democratic Party funded itself. Now, so far they've gotten caught. TD Bank got caught because when they took some of this money and they put it into political campaigns, they had to have somebody's social security number to do it because FEC requires a donor.
Yes.
So they stole identity of people and made the contributions under your name. You didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
That was one part of the fraud. But what Sean Taylor found was much more massive. Now, if you read what the federal government did in penalizing TD Bank, and nobody went to prison. TD Bank says like literally trillions of dollars were money laundered. But all they could find was one guy who came in and made $1 million deposits every day. They couldn't find where the money was. Well, they didn't want to, because if they found it, it would have traced it back to the CIA, would trace it back to the Biden family, would trace it back to having the Border Patrol stand down. And the criminals were Obama, Biden. These were the top criminals. McCarrick, who's now dead, Pope Francis, who is now dead. So you had the Catholic Church through the Vatican operating the drug trade and child pedophilia. And this pedophilia is a common theme throughout all of the elites, the P. Diddy's, the Epstein's. It's an intelligence operation.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein. Pedophilia is fundamentally satanic.
Yes.
It's fundamentally, I wrote a book called Bad Samaritans on all this. I predicted, early 2010 or so, that the LGBT movement was going to next go after pedophilia. At the time, everybody thought that was, oh no, they'll never go there. That'd be wrong. Well, they had the Man-Boy Love Association.
Yeah, NAMBLA.
And they were promoting it,
yes.
normalizing pedophilia. This was now, sexual attraction to minor attracted adults, they called them. Can't call them pedophilia anymore, trying to normalize it.
Yes.
And the children were stolen from their homes, separated from their parents, and put in situations where they were raped by insane adults and trafficked in desperately lives that were evil. These children were ruined morally and ruined. I mean, the sin was enormous.
Yeah.
Or darkest sins you can imagine, but it became normalized. I said, next they'll go after necrophilia. They might as well have sex with the dead. Then after that, they'll go into normalized snuff sex, where someone's killed to heighten the sex attraction of all the people watching it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because once you cross one line, there's really no end to it. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, before Armageddon starts again on me, I'm good. I had to switch to the good old wireless internet here. Dr. Corsi, I got a question because you're kind of a pioneer, and Mike had mentioned your book Abomination originally, but there was a book that led up to that, and that was Where's the Birth Certificate, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of started the whole birther thing, and that's amazing.
Well, in fact, I found the birth certificate from which Obama's was copied, and I gave it to Sheriff Arpaio.
Yes.
And they created forensic labs. This was just recently. They had a press conference, 2009 or whatever it was, and the two forensic labs said I was right. So the birth certificate I found, you had fields in it that were identically transformed into Obama's birth certificate. And then others were added, but it was clear that this was a copy from someone. They didn't.
I remember that. It was the long form birth certificate.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
They released that in 2011, I believe it was.
So I brought that up so everybody, in case they didn't know who you were, now everybody knows who you are.
Well, and in fact,
I think it's really cool that you're able to be with us today. So, I'm impressed.
Well, and so look, they would demonize me for that. To the guy who thought Obama didn't have a birth certificate. Ha ha ha. Well, he didn't have a birth certificate. I think his father was subdued in Indonesia. Look up SUBUD right now on the computer. SUBUD, Indonesia. Look at pictures of him young, and you can post it. It looks identical to Obama. Subdued is an Indonesian meditation cult. It was only popular in Hawaii and Chicago, both of which Obama showed up in.
Yes.
Okay? And so this woman who was named Fuddy, who was in charge of the birth certificate records in Hawaii, couldn't release Obama birth certificate. They didn't have one. She was a member of the Subud sect. She died in a mysterious airplane crash coming off of one of the islands. And she was the only person in the airplane crash who died, and there are pictures of her in the water surviving. Okay, and so everybody in that airplane crash survived, except for this one woman who was Subud and in charge of the Obama birth certificate, which we proved was fake.
Yeah. Turns out you were right the whole time, and a village in Kenya really was missing their idiot.
Obama was obviously not Luo African, because I went to Africa, and the Luo have physical characteristics. Obama's characteristics are much more Indonesian. His skin color, his features are much more Indonesian.
Yeah.
And that's why the Subud character, and the stories I got and all the research I had done, Ann Dunham, the mother, was very much rebellious that she had been ripped out of a school she had attended, in Lake Washington. And she, in Washington State, she wanted to go to the University of Washington. And their parents, who were CIA, demanded, this was in the era when the CIA was trying to take over Hawaii for communism. And so therefore they were Frank Marshall Davis was there,
Yes.
from Chicago, a black communist who was writing newspaper columns in Chicago, and then did the same. And he also wrote sex novels. He was a pervert too, and
Yes.
so again, he was one of Obama's mentors growing up. I pointed that out in Obama Nation. Now, when you deal with that kind of a culture, Ann Dunham is rebellious. I had been told, and I wrote about this in WorldNet Daily, that she started frequenting a bar that was owned by one of the two authors of The Ugly American, and all the intelligence agents from Indonesia, KGB, and U.S. all used to meet in that bar. So I'm sure she was conceived through a relationship that developed with the Indonesians who were at that time also penetrating into Hawaii for communism.
Sure.
Finally, in a rebellion that occurred, Suharto and one of the other leaders in Indonesia, CIA went in and killed most of the communists, and there's movies about that, and I studied that period of time.
Yeah.
So I'm confident Obama was Indonesian, and I think there was a time when he thought his father was Frank Marshall Davis, and he even told people he thought his father was Frank Marshall Davis.
Yeah.
I'm sure Obama grew up confused about who his father was.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, it really shows, that is one thing the left is very good at, that we have to give them at least some level of credit for, is they're good at long-term planning. They're good at taking an idea and spending the next 100 years to carry it out.
And I believe Obama was a CIA creation, a CIA legend, because Vernon Jordan wrote at the time about these small group of blacks that were being supported by the government and brought into. I'm sure the CIA in the 50s decided that they could produce a black president that they could control as a communist. The CIA under Allen Dulles was always a globalist organization.
Yes.
It was not aligned to the United States. His vision was that we should become the Fourth Reich.
Yeah.
And he brought over many of the people from the Third Reich and put them in the intelligence agencies. Galen's entire agency from the Gestapo was brought in by Dulles to be made part of the CIA in Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we brought over Operation Paperclip, many of the scientists and top people of Werner von Braun, who was making, V2
V2 rockets.
Yeah. And with Jewish slave labor, and he became our top space scientist under John Kennedy to take us to the moon.
Yeah.
Okay, so we became the Fourth Reich, and the Dulleses were architecting that. So therefore, the idea that they could pick a black to be president in the when Obama finally came into power, which took that, born in 1960, he wasn't going to be able to be president until 2008. But by that time, they would have a black communist president that the CIA controlled. And that would be revolutionary for the United States, and again, would advance their plan of destroying the United States so we would become part of the New World Order, one world government.
Yeah. I mean, the whole history of this, we could spend hours with you going over all this. Unfortunately, though, we are almost out of time. So I want to see, are there any words of wisdom you want to leave our audience with? And when's your next book coming out?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm right now trying to, my wife divorced me. I'm trying to reestablish some businesses. I'm creating a veterans organization called Veterans First. We have a foundation. I did a lot of work on the birth certificate, and I did a lot of work proving that there's algorithms, the State Board of Election, permit the creation of all these duplicate votes. We've set up the basis for President Trump to do an executive order and demand the states go to voter IDs and proof of citizenship. That's coming down the pike. Go to gods5stones.com, G-O-D-S, no apostrophe, you spell out 5, F-I-V-E, stones is plural. You'll see all the work we've done on the election fraud, and we've cracked the code on that. And Donald Trump knows that. I'm working with Peter Ticktin, who is the Ticktin, is President Trump's attorney.
Yes.
And so we've done the research. I've done the research, which will be the basis for Donald Trump's next executive order to get these corrupt state board of election voter registrations thrown away and new ones created on voter ID and proof of citizenship for the 2026 midterm election. Otherwise, the Democrats will steal it.
Agreed.
Because we found these algorithms, the Democrats did not use them in 2024. But notice in 2024, all the battleground states stopped counting on the night of the election, and they voted. They reported for Trump. They did that because I was set up to catch them. If they stopped counting and produced mail-in votes, they would have gone to prison. So they couldn't use the algorithms for the presidential election, but they did use them for a lot of down-ballot elections.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, it's amazing when there's actually eyes on. The counting stops when it's supposed to and doesn't keep going on for 3 weeks, except in California where they stole a few House seats.
Okay, so in the end, I always end my podcast by saying, in the end, God always wins. God created this place, and God's not going to lose. So this evil is going to be gone. In the end, God
I believe so.
Yeah, but we have to fight it. If we don't fight it, if we don't expose it, if I hadn't done the work I've done, many things would be different. And so therefore, others need to continue this work. We need to continue to fight for truth and the values that God instilled in us as human beings if we want to live correctly. And if we do that, we can have racial unity. People will naturally accept other races as long as they're not forced to. All you have to do is get the experience of other races, and the people will find attraction across races. And so therefore, let it happen naturally.
Agreed. Sorry, go ahead.
So I think in the end, Donald Trump, I think, is a world historic figure, and that he is now, I think, understands the importance of God. Surviving the assassination attempts the way he did, I think he knows it was the hand of God that allowed him to survive. His religion has never been deeper.
Without a doubt.
A spiritual place. And I think we finally have someone in power who is fighting for God and for America. And I've known Donald Trump for almost 45 years. And I've supported him in all three of his campaigns, even to the point where the Mueller investigation wanted to put me in prison, but I refused to take their plea deal. And they did not indict me. That's another long story.
Yeah.
But the point is, I'm a very strong supporter of the MAGA movement and Donald Trump.
Well, I think you made a really good point too. God will give you the tools you need to achieve justice, but it's up to individuals to do something with those tools and take action. That it takes a courageous person to step forward and do what's right, but God will be there to protect you and will provide the tools you need to accomplish it.
What sets people free, and God is right again, is the truth. You can't do it through any other way except to expose and you promote the truth. That alone is what changes things from truth defeats evil. Evil's always a lie. The Democrats don't have a single idea that works. They're all lies. And you can tell them because the ideas don't work, that they're premised on lies.
Yes. And I do think some of the American people are beginning to wake up to this. They're starting to notice the pattern that things are changing. Well, I want to again thank you for joining us tonight, Dr. Corsi. To our audience, please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people